There are a couple of images of women in the early 20th century that I want to mention, and some misunderstanding about one of them at least. I'm referring to the image of the flapper girl. That image which we connect very much with the 1920s, short skirts, bangs, hairstyle, heavy makeup, smoking, knocking on the door of the speakeasy bar, and all of that. It's not that any of that is false, but what's a misconception is that the idea of that flapper girl started earlier, before the 1920s, and also, since we associate that image, that stereotype, with a middle or upper class woman. In fact, originally, the flapper girl was working class. A woman who worked in the factory, and after work, with all the get up to go out, girls just want to have fun. And that was part of their work day and then the night that followed. A very different image was something called the Gibson Girl. And this image is that of stereotypically tall, slim, willowy, athletic, educated, professional. If one wanted to have what I think is a perfect example of that image of the Gibson Girl, it would be the actress Katherine Hepburn in all of those qualities that she had. In the 1920s, I would like to speak about an immigrant group that we don't hear very much about. When we think of immigration, we're always thinking about from Europe to America. But in fact, the history of immigration talks about Asians to America and people from Latin America up to into the United States. I'm thinking specifically of Mexican families that went into the Southwest to find work. In such families, these women were very much under the control of their husbands, to the degree that everything that the woman earned went directly to the husband, and he had this kind of complete control over her. Coming into the United States, the experience of the United States, whatever disadvantages that women may have had here in the United States, might still be seen as a more advantageous situation compared to the life that Mexican women had in Mexico. And they were not immune to these discoveries and these possibilities. And so what we see happening is a kind of phenomenon of these Mexican women working in these families here in the United States, in a state like Texas, for example, feeling more independent, feeling that maybe they should control some of their wages, that it didn't automatically go to their husband. In other words, taking on some of those American attributes of greater freedom. Much to the dismay of most of these Mexican husbands, but overall a positive as far as those women were concerned. When the stock market crashed at the end of the 1920s, all those images of good times in terms of the Prohibition period, which are true as far as they go, but in all those good times that we associate with the prosperous 1920s, we must never forget that during that so-called prosperous decade, 2/3 of the American people, and that shared percentage of women, were living at below subsistence level. Below subsistence level. In other words, there's a great deal of suffering going on during this prosperous decade. Not everybody shared in that prosperity, to be sure. When the stock market crash leads us into the Great Depression, this certainly was a major disaster as far as the American family and particularly American women were concerned in these ways. Unemployment reached astronomical proportions. We're still in that stage of history where men thought that it was their natural right to have jobs. For women to have jobs outside the home was considered an anomaly, not the norm by any means. With high unemployment, that is to say, with scarcer amount of jobs available, men felt this even more strongly. The irony of that was that women in certain families
Sample complete. Ready to continue?